Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson. This is our 190th episode. Wow. So here we are on episode 190, and we have a show that is part of the Courtney, I Am Curious series. And of course, this is a series, which is what it sounds like. You're curious, you ask, I answer, or I do my best to try to answer. And these are questions typically about my individual experience or things that I uh, uh, can testify to in some regards about my own personal journey in life. So, today in the show, what is our specific topic that you're curious about that you, a community member, has asked me? Well, the show topic today is, how did you open your own law firm at age 26? So this is one of the questions that for a while I would get questions about this, and I would think, well, that's, I don't really understand the question. I would think, well, I opened it like anybody else would, right? I mean, I had to make sure I had all my credentialing and licensing and everything, and then I just found a physical office and signed a lease and opened my business. I mean, it didn't seem to me at the time when I would first get these questions, especially when I did first open my firm, like it was anything, difficult or unusual. Any business is challenging. So opening a law firm has very specific types of challenges related to practicing that in that field as a professional. But they're not, in my personal experience, that much different than sort of your generic business ownership issues. So I do always mention in our programs that if you come to CourtneyAnderson.com, we have a central blog. We also have a companion video or television talk show. This is, of course, our audio radio talk show. And we've got those programs. We've got links. We have a show page on CourtneyAnderson.com that is just for this website, where all of the links and the data that I reference in the program, we'll have those sources. We also are going to have the opportunity for you to see some of our show sponsors, and there are going to be advertisements and or affiliate links that are to organizations that are supporting our program. So please do click on those. If you see anything that's a good or service that you think, I definitely want one of those, click on those through our website. The interesting thing about practicing law is, well, one, I'm not currently 26 years old. I was 26 years old, but I'm not currently 26. So part of the benefit of not currently being 26 is I have the ability to sort of, look back, and hindsight, as the cliche is 2020. I don't know if it's 2020, but it definitely, now I do have more perspective. And the really interesting thing that I have perspective on is I'll meet, I'll go to lawyer meetings. So, for those of you, I'm sure many of you in the community today on the program are lawyers or are planning to be lawyers. And some of you aren't. You're just interested in business. So for those who aren't lawyers, every jurisdiction has their own individual rules. But in the United States, to become a licensed attorney, you have to earn a law degree. Law school in the United States is it's somewhere around 86, 88 credit hours. It's somewhere in that vicinity. And a credit hour each course in a traditional university semester is typically weighted for about 3 credits. To have a degree that takes you, 85, 86, 88 credit hours, it takes about 3 years. To be admitted in the United States to go to a law school program, you have to already have, it's required that you have an undergraduate degree. So for most people in the United States, an undergraduate degree is somewhere around 120 credit hours. It takes somewhere around 3 years or 4. I think that, I don't know what the average is, but the average intended amount of time in undergrad is 4 years. It's intended to be a 4-year program, right? So you have a freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and a senior year, somewhat analogous to in the United States high school. High school is also a 4-year program. In high school, you have 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and in the United States, you finish high school somewhere around 18 years old. And then if you go right to your undergraduate program, that'll take 4 years, right? So you should earn that somewhere around 22, 23. Ideally, this is with no stopping. And then law school is another 3 years. So you need 7 years of college or the equivalent thereof just to earn the degree to be a lawyer. Then beyond that, the degree is just a degree. In the United States, the degree is a professional doctorate. So in the United States, it's similar to a medical degree. A medical degree is a professional doctorate, an MD or a DO, right? A doctor of medicine or an osteopath doctor. In the United States, similarly, the law degree is a doctor of jurisprudence. So it's a 3 year after you're already prior 4 years. So you have 7 years of college at a minimum on average, and that you earn your doctorate degree, assuming, of course, you complete your classes and all the requirements for the degree, you know, residency, grades, whatever the extra requirements are. So you complete that, you have a doctor of jurisprudence. That's 7 years on average, or the equivalent thereof of college classes. But it is, no matter how many years it took you, it's 120 credit hours in undergrad, and it's 86 or somewhere around there credit hours in law school. So that's a lot of credit hours, relatively speaking. All right. Does that mean you're ready to be a lawyer? No. That just means you have you finished the professional academic part. Now you have to go ahead and now you're qualified in many jurisdictions to take the licensing. So you have to go to pass a very very comprehensive exam. It's called the bar exam. So the United States has every state jurisdiction has their own individual bar exam rules. In general, the rule is you have to pass the bar exam. But then depending on what state you want to pass the bar exam in, they're going to have different rules of, is it 2 days of a test? Is it 3 days of a test? Specifically what material is going to be on there, all of that. So the degree, the doctor of jurisprudence, is just the prerequisite to be able to now take this bar exam. Now, some states have a bar exam that you can take earlier in your education, like you can take after your first year of law school, and then you take the rest of it after you complete your degree or right around that time. But you're not going to be able to get the license without the education. There are some states that have programs where you can study on your own, and then meet some documented self-study and be eligible to sit for the exam. But you have to look and see what your state is. But in general, those are very few and very rare. But in general, so that's the program in the States. So in the States, you have 7 years of college, or at least 120 credit hours, somewhere around there, of undergraduate degree that you completed, and then you have another 86, 87, 88 credit hours of law school on top of that. So it's been a while that you've been working academically. Now you're going to go have this totally separate process of a bar exam. It's a test. It's a multiple day test. And then on top of the test, every one of these state jurisdictions also has their other investigation that they're going to conduct into who you are and what you've sort of done in life, to see if you meet the sort of character and fitness part. So, things like, your criminal record and issues like that. So there's a lot that has to be done. So at the end of all of this, if you finish your, sort of generic equivalent of 7 years of university, you have your bachelor's, your undergraduate degree, and you have your doctor of jurisprudence, your law degree, and you pass this fitness background check, character investigation, because if that's required. So if you don't pass that, if they don't, and there's always interesting stories in the media. There's one about in this U.S. Obviously, I'm referring to our system because I know it. And that's what I'm talking about. In the U.S., there was an interesting story about somebody who was in journalism and then had a lot of issues in journalism where they were alleged to be fabricating stories that they were presenting as as nonfiction, but it turned out they were lies. And many years later, so the person was sort of publicly humiliated. They even made a movie about this. It was interesting. I saw the movie, and they've done tons of you can imagine media coverage about somebody who worked in media and then was sort of publicly shown to be, dishonest, and what they presented to be a journalistic endeavor was actually just, fiction, like they made it up. And then many, many, many years later, the person wanted to be a lawyer and practice law, and went to the guy, and to the best of my knowledge, completed all the education, right? So yeah, I've got undergrad, and I've earned my law degree, my doctorate of jurisprudence, my professional doctorate, and I believe the exam wasn't the issue, the bar exam. I think the problem was that the person wasn't being approved by the jurisdictional licensing, because they said that they weren't able to pass this background investigation due to the fraudulent acts that had preceded the person. So you have to have all of this to be able to get to the point where we're able to talk about opening a law firm, right? So it's all of that education, right? And then you have to pass this background check and character study investigation, and then you have to also pass the bar exam. And there's different parts to it. Part of the licensing is going to talk about that jurisdiction and their specific laws in that jurisdiction. Some of it's going to also talk about sort of federal laws that are everywhere in the U.S. In addition, there's another sort of companion piece to this exam process where they're going to test you on ethics. The multi-state professional responsibility exam, or the MPRE, which is another sort of, you have to pass this too, which is a test to sort of make sure that you, it's what it sounds like, it's ethics. So they give you all these examples, and you're supposed to sort of figure out, am I allowed to do that? Can I do that? And so there's all this to be done. Obviously, this takes a while, right? So after all this is all completed, yay! The person finally is licensed to do what? You're given a license to practice law. When all this is done and you're licensed to practice law, then now, and it's very nice. They have a swearing in ceremony. There's a hugely beautiful, nice piece of sort of parchment, the documentation. So it's a physical piece of paper, like a college degree. You have your license. I find it to be beautiful. On the license, on the on the CourtneyAnderson.com page, I'll put a little attachment so you can see it. From the Supreme Court of Texas. It's beautiful. So I was in the United States and the state of Texas, and I did all of this, right? So all this academic, and then all of the investigation, and then the study of my fitness, and then all of the different licensing, the sitting for several days on state law, on federal law, and then this additional sort of ancillary but complementary responsibility exam, multi-state professional responsibility exam. All right, so that's sort of just the basics, big picture. So it's a lot that goes into earning the license. Once you earn the license, now what can you do? This is like, any other license. I have a driver's license. What can I do? Drive, right? I have a law license. What can I do? Practice law. Okay. So here's my perspective on all of this. And I've done a show in this series, in the Courtney I Am Curious series. I did a show where I talked about my undergraduate experience and how I was really focused on moving and graduating swiftly, because I didn't want to spend a lot of time on something where I knew I already was planning before I finished high school that I was going to be, going to some graduate degree programs. So I knew I had a lot ahead of me, and I didn't want to get bogged down in terms of time on the bachelor's or the undergraduate degree, because it was just sort of, preliminary. It was like an appetizer, right? So I finished in, 3 years and graduated from undergraduate, and I was 20 years old, and I went right into law school. So I was 20 years old when I started law school. So then I go to law school, and my plan all along was to own my own business. All along of what? Life, basically. But when I was a little kid, and I've shared in other programs, I've talked about some of the role models I've had, my, grandparents and other people in my life who were business people themselves, and that sort of was part of it. And the other part of it is I just love the idea of it. To me, it just seemed like so much fun, and so exciting, to build your own endeavor. So my plan was always to own my own business. I never ever thought about, and this may sound, for people in law school or people who are lawyers, it sounds, I'm sure, really weird. I never even considered working for anyone else. I mean, the plan was to get their degree, and then I was going to open this business, and then I was going to use the degree in conjunction with all the other stuff I was interested in. So I've always been interested in real estate, so it made sense, right? As a lawyer, you study property and contracts and all this information that I use all the time. So it was a huge advantage. The other thing is I'd already started before I finished law school. I even took time off in law school to go run other businesses. I'd opened an entertainment firm at the time, a music record company, and I mean I was doing a lot. And we talk about this in different programs, but basically, I never thought I was going to go to law school and then go work with somebody else's company. My whole plan was to just use the degree and the license to open a firm, but to also integrate the being an attorney with all this other stuff I had already been doing or I'd already planned to do. So it's a little bit of a different focus. When you go to the show notes and CourtneyAnderson.com, go to that site, we've got individual pages for each show, and we've got an individual page for this show for episode 190. And on this page, I tried to sort of structure as I was putting the show notes together and the outline for this program. I was thinking, okay, well, who would ask this question? Somebody who's just interested in business, right? Who's thinking, oh, okay, we opened a business, so they just want to talk about sort of the business part. There might be other people who are lawyers who going to have their own specific perspective on being an attorney and what that entails. And then there are going to be other people who are going to say, hey, I'm just interested because I'm in my 20s and I want to do something potentially with the business. And so there might be people who just think the age is really interesting. And there might be other people who think, well, okay, I know she's a female, so maybe I'm interested in how a female did that, or I know her, she's an American and her nationality or whatever. So a couple of things in the show notes. You'll see that I put the data because we talk about in so many programs, data is our friend, because data is what kind of helps us get a better measurement of our world around us. Everything else in our head is filtered through what we think, what we experience, what we believe, what we want. It's skewed. So it's also limited, right? All right, so I put some data on the show page, and I went to the United States and the state of Texas, which is where I opened my business at 26. Is where I opened the law firm. I went and looked at their data, and so they have some data from their state entity for attorneys, and it shows from 2009. The data in 2009 was that people who work by themselves as a lawyer, and those are typically called solo practitioners. So it's what it sounds like. A solo practitioner is somebody who practices law. They're a practitioner. They're doing it by themselves, solo. Hence, solo practitioner. So this is the group of people who did what I did. They open their own firm. They work as a lawyer. So we all have to agree on that. And we talked about how some of the sort of big picture. I'm leaving stuff out, obviously. That's not every nuanced detail, but it's sort of the generic big picture of how much work goes into just getting your law license. So the people who work by themselves, their own law firm, it says from 2009 in Texas that those lawyers reported, or the data showed, that their income annually, US dollars, was $97,142. Not every person who did this earned $97,142 was the average. So some people earned a lot more than that, and some people earned a lot less than that, but that was the average. So that'll give you an idea, because I think it's important to anchor these things, by understanding why. And I think the numbers will help you better at least see my logic. So as I said earlier, I had already opened other businesses and tried, and some had some success and had some horrible failure, because business is not, it's not something where you just want something bad enough and woo, there it is, I wanted it. No, there's a lot of decisions and a lot of action and a lot of the thing that I focus on now that I'm a lot more mature, strategy. All right, so there gives you some data. All right, so you're thinking, all right, so this thing where you work by yourself as a lawyer on your own law firm on average. Now, remember, some people earn a lot less, some people earn a lot more, and in that number, it'll be people who just started, like people like myself who, hey, I was licensed, and let me be really clear on this. This is, and I'm not exaggerating. I was licensed, at, I don't know, whatever, like in the morning. I actually, the judge that swore me in was, my mother is also an attorney, and so was a colleague of hers, and so swore me in. I have a picture. And like, then I just went right to my law office right after that. Now you're wondering, well, how did you have a law office? Well, okay, as I said, I already had other businesses, and I'd already been, engaged in trying to live my entrepreneurial dreams. I already had an office. The only thing I did when the law office, I went to the existing office and I just had a different sign that said Law Office of Courtney E. Anderson, and I just put that sign on the door, and then I just was right there ready to go. I've been running the record company and my other businesses already, interest out of that same office, so it was already set up. All right, so you're thinking, all right, so these people on average earn somewhere around in Texas $97,142. Depending on who you are and your life experience, that sounds like an awesome amount of money or an awful amount of money. It's all relative. But I wanted to give you some anchor data. On the show notes page there on CourtneyAnderson.com, you'll also see this. This idea of, hey, somebody literally just finished their licensing. So that means you graduated, you finished all your tests, you earned whatever scores are required, you passed your background investigation. Boom, fine. Oh, and you have to pay fees, right? Like there's always fees. And so after all of this is done, right, you're fingerprinted, as part of your investigation. There's a lot. This takes time. This is all done. Yay! Is Courtney the only one that does this? No, lots of people do it. Now, lots of people is, I'm loosely using that terminology. So on the show page, here's some data. I'm not alone, right? And recently graduating from law school and then finishing all the other requirements, right, to become licensed. According to the data here from NBC News on the show notes page, you'll see it says recent law graduates going solo. So that's what it sounds like, solo, by myself, me. Increased from 3.5% in 2008 to 5.5% in 2009. Interesting. So what they're talking about is somebody who, like I did, I went through all this process, we got all this stuff done, and now I'm literally just licensed. What am I going to do? I'm opening my own firm. It's not something that only I did. Like I said, lots of other people, somewhere around in 2009, 5.5% of people did that. Now you may think, well, that's not a lot. Right, out of 100%, only 5.5% did this. That's a really small percent. It's all relative. It's all relative. I just said other people. Okay. And lots of other people, 5.5%, you have to understand there's over 1 million attorneys in the US, right? Total. So of course there's a percentage of those every year that are new. So it's thousands of people that went right into did what I did. Hey, I'm licensed. Boom, I'm open. So I want to just, make that clear. One of the reasons, of course, that I said it was something I wanted to do is because that was the plan. My plan all along was to open my own firm. And I say this now, and I realize in hindsight, it was one of the things I didn't, do particularly well. But because I was in law school and I was totally focused the whole time on all my other dreams, and then I launched and had some success, and then had some catastrophic financial losses in my record company, I never even paid attention. The law school I went to is academically a wonderful school, and it has systems set up to make sure that people. There's a small percentage of people that go to sort of the top law schools, ranked by different organizations that make decisions on these types of things, right? And in those sort of top schools, they have a history and an infrastructure where many of their top graduates, by grades and other accomplishments, will go into the big premium brand law firms. So, and or they work for premium office level judges. These are the most prestigious things you'll do as a premium lawyer. You're going to go work at what they call a big law. I mean, it sounds what it sounds like. It's a big law firm. And by big size, usually have large amounts of lawyers, and they have a big brand. They're known. Their clients are the biggest, usually businesses in the world, and so they have a large revenue streams. And so, if that's what you want to do is practice lawyer at a big law firm. Sometimes I'll use the phrase a big fancy law firm. They are fancy. Their customers, they charge the most, but they deliver the best. But those jobs, and this is me from memory, and this is a rough estimate, but those jobs at the elite law firm. Right. So I said my plan was to go right and open Law Office Courtney Anderson, which is what I did. Other people's goal in law school is to do everything that they can to be hired eventually when they graduate and are licensed by this big law firm. and they're actually hired before they actually are licensed. What happens that this is what I'm saying, that when I look back in hindsight, I realize, all right, maybe I should have taken advantage of more opportunities. I just didn't think about it. The law school I went to has this history and this reputation, where they have on campus interviews for part-time summer jobs. And by part-time, I mean either you work only in the summer, or so you may work a full schedule, but you're working only in the summer, or you may work part-time hours another time. And what they're doing is those jobs are at those elite firms, and they come to campus, and they had rooms. And I mean, this is a long time ago now, but from memory. But I remember it happening because it's like one building, and so law school, by just virtue of, you can imagine the numbers, it's even at a big law school, quote unquote, it's small numbers of students relative to my undergraduate. My undergraduate school had tens of thousands of students. So law school is like one building, and it had really much smaller numbers. So you saw what was going on because it was not that much space. You could see down the hallway. And they had a whole thing where they would put pieces of paper on the wall and talk about interviewing. This is before the internet, so okay. And then they had little rooms, and I would walk by them, and then people would go, and it was like a big thing, and other people in my class were talking about they're going to go interview. And what are they interviewing for? They're interviewing to go work at these fancy, prestigious firms as law students. And you start this in your beginning, right at the beginning, right? Because your first year, law school is 3 years traditionally, right? We talked about that, 'cause it's somewhere around 80 something credit hours. So after their first year, they've interviewed, and now they're going to go. And the interviews, what I'm saying is, I was there. I was walking around, and I saw people. I saw the pieces of paper, like telling people, how to sign up, and when the interview dates would be. And then representatives from these very prestigious places came to campus, and they were in this one hallway where they had all these little small rooms, and then people would go in there and do the interviews. I saw all this and heard it. I just didn't do anything because I was all focused on my own dreams, right? Like, oh, I'm starting, and now I'm going to run my record company, and then I've got to get this law school thing done, too, because I need to integrate that with my business stuff. But I never even like stopped to see anything about that. How do you sign up, or because in my mind it wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't interested in that. Now, and I'm trying to make myself sound a little bit more reasonable. Part of it, I think, is because I was 20 years old when I started. And I had all this stuff in my head. I don't regret anything, but I do think if I'd maybe been a little bit more mature, I would have realized, oh, maybe I should have met some of those people or pay attention, but I didn't. So here we go. So people who were paying attention, and that was part of their goal, they went and they interviewed. They were hired in the summer between their first year and second year. And then if they were, whatever went well, if they wanted to, they went again their second and third year to either the same place or a similarly, really prestigious place. And then they already were set up to be offered these really fancy, prestigious jobs. And those jobs, now the numbers move, and it depends on where you are and the years, but if I remember correctly, the pay was somewhere around $3,000 a week for the summer jobs. And then if I remember correctly, going into those, if so let's say it went well their first summer and their second summer, and then when you graduated after your third year, then you'd be hired, you go into a full-time position, right? Sometimes I think they'd extend the position, pending you finishing your background check investigation and passing all your exams. So those jobs, if I remember, are somewhere around $160,000. So obviously I gave data earlier that solo practitioner average is $97,000. So if you're talking $160,000, that's a huge, relatively speaking, increase. Just your first year, right? So I see why, at least financially. Now, of course, some people went into that, they didn't care about the money, but they just were interested. They were interested in the types of law that you practice at these big law firms, which again is mostly, you think, well, who pays big law firms? Well, big companies. So you're doing a lot of corporate law, you're doing mergers and acquisition, you may have other interests in related to finance or some other specialty that is part of that world, maybe of interest or expertise in banking. So that's why they were doing that. Maybe they love the content, maybe they love the income. It doesn't matter why, but they loved it. So that's one path. Another path is people aspired to do that. Maybe they interviewed, but they weren't hired, right? They didn't get that job. And so then they were going to go work at another law firm, so maybe it won't be one that's one of these sort of top brands, but it'll still be nice, and maybe it'll pay not as much. Those are the sort of the elite, but it'll be very nice. And then people will spend a lot of time interviewing for that. I said that there's also a subset of people who have interest in either teaching law as a law professor, and a scholar, and or being a jurist, a judge. And so they're very prestigious opportunities where students, the same type of thing. I saw the signage when I was in law school. I just again didn't pay attention. Where they come and you can be interviewed for and submit your information and potentially go and work for a judge as a law clerk. It's called a clerkship. It's very prestigious. Okay, so all this is to say all this stuff. So here I am in life, moving along, working on my goal and dream and plan, which was the open law office scoring Anderson. I actually did meet and surpass that goal, which is what we talk about all the time. What I'm just telling you right now is I wish, and now that I'm older and I look back, I think, oh, well, maybe I should have paid attention to some other stuff. Not that I would have changed my goal, but I certainly could have learned more. I certainly could have met different people, right? It might have opened up my experiences in life. So that's just part of the immaturity of being really, and the immaturity and tunnel vision that came along with the immaturity. I was like, I have a plan, which I did, and it worked in the sense that I accomplished everything, surpassed my goals, and here I am, many years later, delightedly happy with all the things I do. I'm just saying that I foreclosed opportunities by just not showing up or paying attention, and I if I could do it again, I would have said I would not overlook an opportunity, right? So all that's to say, I stuck with my goal. And as I just read the data, a very small percentage of people overall, but a number of people, right, do go into right from law school to their own firm. It's typically not what the majority of people are talking about in law school, because the majority of people are usually talking about this big fancy law firm and or the big fancy clerk with a jurist, because those are the most powerful and prestigious things to give you access potentially. Hopefully, if you want to be a Supreme Court judge, Supreme Court justice, then the clerkship is really important. You want to be a law school professor, it's really important. If you want to be at a big fancy law firm where you're going to enter these jobs where you make $160,000 a year to start, and then potentially that's just the start. Remember, if you're at a big fancy law firm, many of them historically were structured in a legal way as partnerships. So there's what lawyers will talk about it in those types of organizations is you enter at the sort of the basic level, but if you succeed in whatever the metrics are at the organization over time, you'll be promoted upwards, and then eventually potentially be offered an opportunity to be a part owner of the company, of the entire firm, a partner. That's what it sounds like. You're a partner of the organization, and that's where people make seven figures. They're millionaires, right? So there are all these discussions, and people typically will focus on the prestigious ones because that's why they go to a very prestigious competitive school. They didn't go there to not have big dreams, right? There are people, there weren't many. Now, this is a long time ago, relatively speaking, when I was in law school, but there weren't many people who talked about owning their own firm. I can't remember. I'm sure I mentioned it to some people. I don't remember anyone ever saying, oh yeah, me too. I think some people view the idea that you're going to own your own firm as sort of like a fallback. Like if everything else fails and you don't get a really fancy job and you don't get a fancy clerkship and nobody else, even at a less fancy place, hires you, and worst case scenario, you'd work for yourself. But it wasn't something where people thought that's prestigious. Typically, I would argue that's reasonable because most people think, why would you go do something on your own when what do you know about life? Right? Who are you to think you're going to open a business? And in a business in a brand new thing that you haven't even finished. One of the things that it's so prestigious about going and being part of working with a judge or these law firms of international reputation is because the people who are running those have so much knowledge for you to learn. Right? I mean, come on. You get an opportunity to work with literally the best in the world. So of course you're going to take it. Where the idea of going out on your own, especially if you're somebody younger that didn't go and work 30 years and then come back to law school. But if you're somebody who went more traditional and you're literally a young person, young age, what do you know about any of this? What do you know about law itself, the legal questions that people will bring you, the sort of substance of the analysis, on top of what do you know about running a business? So I think there are many reasonable reasons why it's not necessarily the number one thing people talk about. I do think it's changed. Now, some of the data in the show notes, like I just read you from 2008 and 2009. I mean, that's decades after I went to law school. So maybe it's changing. Maybe more people are saying with the technology that's happened, in terms of you can have a law practice where you integrate services through the internet, it may be something that's more attractive to people. You also have had this huge, this is, I went to law school, I'm talking about like 1992, 1993. I mean, this is way before the tech boom at the end of the 90s. If you weren't around and old enough to pay attention, at the end of the 90s, there was this huge thing they called Y2K, year 2000. When it went from 1999 to the year 2000, there was this, it was all over the media globally that the computers, and wasn't internet so much focused because that hadn't really, it was just sort of started. But the idea that there's something with the computers, and I don't know obviously the details, but the computer, when it went from like 1999, right, from 1900s to into 2000, that there's something in the computers would go wrong and that everything would crash. And so it was this big Y2K thing. People had anxiety and were talking about it. It was a big thing. I, like many things in life, I heard about it, but I didn't really pay attention. And then it turned out that whatever it was that people were fearful of, to the best of our public knowledge, it didn't really happen or impact anybody in the public. I'm sure experts could explain what really did happen and what the anxiety was and everything. I heard about it, but I just, I had a plan. I was working. I was running the law firm of Corney Anderson by then, right? Okay, so all I'm saying is that when you look at what the opportunities that people are exploring today, there was no, there's no Facebook. There's none of the sort of startup culture where you see all these young people coming out of, their universities and high schools. And now you did have, now I'm not, that old, but certainly when I was thinking about my dreams of running my business, I did have people that I looked up to in terms of business ownership. Michael Dell Computers. He'd gone to the same college that I went to undergrad in, and he didn't go to law school, but it's the same school, same campus. And he'd gone there and started a business in his dorm room, before my time, and went out and took that business, and he became Dell Computers, and he was a billionaire, before 30. And so he literally was someone that I could look at and went to that same school, before me, and did that. And of course, we people like, Bill Gates, or, and Steve Jobs, and there's lots of people, Oprah Winfrey had, started a talk show that she owned from the early time. So, I didn't know what the future would hold for her, but certainly by the time when I was in high school, Oprah Winfrey had a national television show. I mean, she'd been doing what she was doing a long time. So there were role models for me to look at, people who had either been to my same school or who had done it at a young age or whatever, who were, my same gender, national origin, and ethnicity. So I had role models. And of course I had my own, as I mentioned in other programs, my grandparents, my grandmother run a family funeral home, and I'd seen and grown up with that, and paid attention and seen, and how being an entrepreneur works in many ways. So all that's to say, there may be more of an allure now, all these decades later, where people look around and say, hey, I love this startup idea. And because it's more common, the technology's changed, the world's in many ways the same, but in many ways it's different. You have more of these examples of people really young saying, hey, I'm going to figure this out now. I'm not going to wait around. And so, like I said, it may be something where a current law student who's 20 wouldn't see the world exactly the way that people did when I was 20. And I hope that's a good thing, because diversity of dreaming is fantastic. So back onto the show page, you'll also see that here's the thing I really want to point out. Although a very small percentage of the overall amount of law school graduates start their own firm immediately, over time, the majority of lawyers actually work in either by themselves as a solo or what's called a small firm. So small firm is what it sounds like. It's not big law. It's not the big fancy place with thousands or hundreds of lawyers and global, but it's small. Maybe it's 2 lawyers or 4 lawyers or whatever. So there's a show statistic on the show page that says in 2005, 62% of attorneys in private practice, so private practice is where you don't work for the government, right? In private practice, 62% of lawyers in private practice in 2005 worked for a solo, that's by themselves, or small firm, according to the American Bar Association. So that's telling you that even though a little teeny percentage of people start out saying, I want to work for myself, over time, the majority of people work for themselves or a small firm. And that makes sense. Again, we mentioned little teeny tiny percentage of people are going to be hired by the very big, very prestigious big law firms. Little teeny tiny percentage of people are going to be able to clerk and be part of a law clerk for the most prestigious judges, so that they can, and those are usually, the clerkships are usually somebody who themselves wants to be a jurist and or wants to be a scholar and teach at a law school. Okay. So that leaves a big fat middle. And as I said, many people go out, work for a law firm, It's not the big fancy elite global one, but it's other people are there, and then they mentor. They have a mentor, and they learn, and then eventually they'll either maybe go out on their own or go out with a few other people. And so that's a normal thing. The majority of people by 2005, it said in private practice, were either small or solo. I wanted to get a number of just solo, because small and solo are two totally different things. Solo is solo. Hey, I'm out here and I'm making a lot of the decisions slash all the decisions because there is nobody else. So there's a little bit more of a safety net in a small firm. Solo practice on the show note page, it says about 35% of U.S. lawyers were solo by themselves. This is from Harvard University's a statistics page. I have the link right there for you. So if 62% of lawyers are solo or small firm, then about 35% of that, so about 35% of that number is going to be the solo, and the rest of them, of course, are going to be small firm. But still, 35% of all lawyers in private practice that are working as lawyers, that's pretty impressive, right? What I'm trying to make the argument is it's not that unusual to want to open your own law firm. And I also am trying to, for people who aren't familiar with or interested in, some of the big picture paths that people can take. Big fancy law firm, clerkships, smaller law firm, and or organization. Some people go in for public service, and they don't, and what they're focusing on is what it sounds like. They want to be an advocate for a specific type of issue, maybe in the environment. They want to work with non-governmental organizations or NGOs, or they want to work on specific types of geographic regions and public services, and maybe working for legal aid. So those are typically not high compensation, obviously, but they're in terms of money, but they may be something that is a person's entire dream. And people are often, again, if that's your goal and dream, and you work in public service or nonprofits, people are able to do so much good. So these are sort of the options. People would ask me, and that's why we're having the show, and they'll say, well, how did you at 26, right? Okay. That's a little young for owning businesses. There's some statistics on the show page. It says this is from the census in the United States, the Census Bureau, part of the federal government there. Its job generally is to get data. It says that from 2002, of all people who are business owners, according to the census, that 1 in 3 of those individuals who own businesses are over 55 years old. It says that and you can see it on the show page. It says 29% of all business owners were between 45 and 54. 24% were between 35 and 44. 12% were between 25 and 36. That's where I was at 26. Although this is not the year. This is this is from 2002, and I opened my business way before that. But still, 12% of business owners were between 25 and 34, and only 2% were under 25. And under 25, of course, was when I opened, my entertainment company, my record company, obviously. And so you can see that that's a really tiny percentage. So I do see that in hindsight. Again, like I said earlier, data is our friend, because in our own heads, we just see what we see. I honestly thought at the time that I, was trying to, live my business dream at, 22 or whatever, or 20 or whatever age it was. Well, I felt old. I felt like, oh, I got to make it happen, and then I saw role models, like I said, who started stuff when they were in undergrad, and it already built it into, whatever their dream was. And I thought, well, I'm slow. Now, of course, I didn't, one of the things that's helped me in life is to seek out data more often. Now, obviously, that's why I share it with you. But at the time I do stuff, when I'm years ago in the past, I didn't do that. I just sort of ran with what my gut told me. And I felt mad often and disappointed. I was mad at myself and I was disappointed with myself, because I felt like, look how slow you're going. Why is it taking you so long? And of course, when I one of the things about doing this series, that it kind of makes me feel better. I cut myself a little bit of slack. And by looking at the data, which I didn't do at the time, I realized that the goals I set for myself were really unusual. And I did get them done, right? Like, I finished college in 3 years. I did open my law firm at 26. Like, I made it happen, but I was so mad at myself for so many of those years in the middle. Like, why is it so slow? Why am I so slow to get this stuff done? And I didn't, get it, that it was that the way I saw things was unusual, just statistically. So if 2% of people under 25 are running businesses, and I'm beating myself up because I'm like, golly, I'm under 25 and my businesses aren't going the way I want them to, or whatever, then now with perspective and data, I feel like, oh, okay. You take on huge tasks that are rare. But at the time, I didn't feel that. At the time, I just felt so mad at myself. Like, oh, why didn't you, work harder and make this happen faster? So if you're in your 20s, if you're, the younger you are, then yeah, it's rare. And if you're like I was at that age, and like I probably like I am now, you don't see that. Age is just, you can't control it. I mean, it is, but so if you're hard on yourself, if you're like I was at that time, like, oh, why am I so slow? Data is your friend. Take a look back and realize you're taking on something unusual. Don't be hard on yourself. Let's work through this. That's part of why I'm here. We do so many of our other programs. I do coaching and mentoring. I work with people individually. Like, we're going to make this happen. One of the things as a lawyer I've done that made me joyful, right, is to work with startups. And it really, I just had a session recently with somebody who had some plans, had never run a business, and sort of had these really big ideas that were going to cost a ton of money. And I started to walk them through why. This is not the way to approach this, because you're going to burn through all your resources, and you're not going to get to a point where you have any income at all. There's no revenue. It's too much on grandiose sort of infrastructure stuff. So I love doing this, and I'm here to help you. I just want you to know that if you, like I was, and probably you are, if you're planning and working on and executing these things at a young age, that you got to give yourself a bit of an emotional break. You're doing something unusual, and that in itself is an accomplishment and a success. It's going to be okay. All right. So age, not an obstacle, right? It's just a reality. If you're in the groups that are smaller representation because you're younger, then that's just what it is. I mean, but you also have to understand that because it's such a small group of people from your demographic, that you're going to have resistance. So you go to the bank. These are other shows, but going to the bank to talk to them about your business and your 22 me. By using the data, you'll better understand sort of why people might say some of the things that they say, or why you might get the reactions. Because at the time, like I said, when I was younger and I wasn't using data as my friend, I would just get so angry at myself mostly, but then I would get frustrated and think, why do other people talk to me like they do? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm thinking, well, now I realize it's such a small percentage of people, right? And that's not that we accept people being unprofessional or using stereotypes. It's just to help us better understand how, to us, even though we're just sort of regular getting stuff done, it's an anomaly for other people that we approach, and our age may be something that's part of their analysis. It's not fair and it's not right, and we're not accepting it. What I'm saying is, though, that it'll help us have a better understanding how other people see the world. I also have a show link and to a piece from a Business Week that was it's entitled "Why So Few Young People Start Businesses." Love it. And it sort of talks about, again, some more statistics showing that this was a more recent piece, and it was showing that only, oh wow, that between 20 years old and 24 years old, only 0.3% of people run their own incorporated business. So again, if you're doing that, then it's normal for you and it's healthy, but it's really rare in terms of what other people's expectation is of people that age. Okay, so just awareness. We're not changing it, and it also, it's going to give us the ability to not be hard on ourselves. Okay. All right, and the link to Business Week also had a piece I put in there that states the obvious I mentioned earlier. Many people I said in law school aren't saying I want to go start my own firm. A, because how do you know what you're doing? A, you've never been a lawyer because you're just getting your license and your education now. And B, if you've not run a business before and you've never been a lawyer, isn't it arrogant to think you're going to figure it out? Most people think, hey, I'm going to go work for somebody who does this, learn from them, and then after I spend, a reasonable amount of time, maybe months or maybe years or maybe decades feeling comfortable, then I might consider opening my own firm. But I'm not going to jump out there on my own. It's too frightening and silly. And some would say it's arrogant. And again, the Business Week link I mentioned, it talked about how there's no good substitute for experience, right? And that is difficult for somebody who's really young, who's 20, because they've not been alive that long. So they might not have had as much time to gain the experience to be successful in their business. Mentoring and asking questions is going to be a key. It's a key to everything I do today. I ask questions constantly. I ask people if I can have them as a mentor constantly for different things I'm interested or learning about. So you can find a way to create support systems and reservoirs of knowledge, because you do need you need expertise. You're not going to just be able to run with just all your own ideas. One of the again, I have a people ask, how did I do this, right? Well, some of it is I had some advantages, right? One of my advantages is opening the law firm is always the plan. That was my goal. That was my dream. That was my version of a big fancy, clerkship. That was my intention. So that's a huge advantage because that's what I was planning on the whole time. The second thing is education. I have statistics on the show page that from the census in the U.S. that talk about how the headline, America's business owners are highly educated, and then it breaks down, the high education rate in terms of bachelor's degree, doctorate or professional degree, and basically the bottom line is, more education, typically overrepresentation in business owners. Well, I had that advantage, right? To open the law firm, I had to have a minimum. It was required to have an undergraduate degree and my doctorate, a doctor of jurisprudence. And so, yeah, okay, that was an advantage too. The other thing I've mentioned in other programs and in this show, I had huge advantages. I have all kinds of relatives who are judges and a parent that's a lawyer. And so I had huge, again, built-in advantages. People I could ask for help. One of my, a family friend who is a lawyer and judge very successful in his own their own firm for decades, is one of the main people I went to all the time. Now, was I given an advantage that was somebody that's a personal friend of my family? Yeah. But I used them as one of my biggest mentors with a question a client had, and I don't even know where to start. Or how do I deal with this issue with the courthouse, or I did use my resources. And a lot of people would listen to this and say, I don't have those resources. And then I'm saying we got to cultivate them. You got to ask. Now, in recent years, and I mean really recently, like in the last couple of years, some of the bar associations I belong to have set up programs to try to reach people who are solos, and this through the bar association sort of do a matchmaking and say, hey, do you want to volunteer to mentor somebody who's new to practicing law? And you say yes or no. And now, of course, I'm experienced, right? And so there are options, but you got to ask. If you don't ask for help, then you're not going to get any help. And you have to be. I did a show. I said about how powerful and important it is that you say to people, I don't know. You got to be willing to ask for help. If you don't, you're going to hurt yourself, and potentially you're also going to deprive your clients of the best resources. So ask. I don't care if it's embarrassing. Ask. I don't care if people talk to you like you're a little kid. That happened to me constantly. I still ask. I asked some of these connections I had, which were sort of built-in assets. I also just ask people at the courthouse. And it's changed over time, but law is a very formal process, and it's government, right? So even though you own your own business, if you're practicing, at some point you're dealing with the courthouse, because that's where anything that you're going to do with the legal system, judges, you're filing a lawsuit, you're showing up for court, all of those are all government employees. So and a lot of them have been doing it a long time. Now, they can't practice law, quote unquote. So what that means is if you don't have a lawyer and you go to the admin, receptionist and ask them what this paperwork means, and that you received from a lawyer, they're not going to be able to read it to you and tell you. A, because they would be practicing law, and usually they're not lawyers. So whatever they tell you would just be their own sort of interpretation, and it may be incorrect, so they just can't give you information. I am a lawyer, so I didn't need legal help. I just needed to understand better how stuff functions. Because one of the things in the show notes that you'll see that I talked about, was my age an obstacle? No, it was. And I used data to be my friend. I talked about, was gender an obstacle? No, I'm aware of my gender. I have some data in the show notes from the U.S. government that shows that the majority of firms that are owned by individuals or men own more firms than women do. Well, okay. And there's historical reasons for that. In the show notes, I address the issue, was my national origin or my ethnicity or color or anything else an obstacle? In my mind, you're going to get the same answer, right? No. I'm aware of it. I understand how people view me. I did also include this piece of data. And it says 1% of unmarried or single Hispanic women, 4% of unmarried or single black women, and 8% of single white women in the United States own businesses. These are really small percentages. So of all women, small percentages are going to own, like 1%, 4%, 8%. Those are tiny percentages. The percentage of black women lawyers that own their own firm, I'm going to just go on a limb, is really tiny. It's super tiny. One, because it's a small percentage of women, black women, that are lawyers at all. I mean, it's really small. So part of the data is my friend. It helps me understand. I would go to the courthouse, and like I said, I'm never embarrassed because there are no such thing as a stupid question. And the law school teaches you the substance of the law. It doesn't teach you anything about business, and it doesn't teach you anything about how to practice law. Like, where do you go to the courthouse to file your paperwork? How do you get a date to go in front of a judge? How long does it take? None of this is covered. So you're gonna have to figure it out. And if you didn't go work for another law firm and have them teach you and show you, then what I did was I just literally asked. I just went down there and I had my suit on. I had no money when I started the law firm, so I went. I'll never forget. I still have the suit. I had money and I went to a discount store and I got one suit. It's a blue suit. And that was the suit that's the only suit I had. So once I got to a point where I had some clients, then I would schedule all of them on the same day so that I could wear my one suit, because the rest of the days I don't have another suit. And then when I was going to go to court, of course, it was my one suit. And then over time I got another suit. It was a light blue suit. I still have that one too. And over time, you just go with what you have. But I asked people at the courthouse, excuse me, I'm a lawyer. My name is, Courtney Anderson. I have paperwork here I need to file. Can you let me know where I need to do that? Sometimes people are very helpful. Sometimes people are really angry and mean and roll their eyes. Really? Again, but many of the people at the courthouse have been there a long time. It's a good government job, meaning benefits and salary. And if you're really friendly, I always apologize to people. I say, oh, I know you're really busy, or, I can wait until you get a moment, but, I have a question. And they're all about their process. It's not about the law. I know that part. I don't know anything about how they do stuff at that courthouse. And here's the other catch. Every one of these courts in the jurisdictions I've worked in have their own separate rules. They call local rules. And it's what it sounds like. It's not like there's a uniform way. Like, here's how you file the paperwork, and here's how much it costs, and here's the office you take it to, and here's where you go to schedule a court date. It's not like that. Every one of these individual judges, in many instances, has their own little way that they do it. I'm not exaggerating. And you have to understand that when I opened my law firm, I was a general practitioner. I still am, although I've, areas I'm mostly focused on now. But what that meant is, if it was, I'm not a specialist, right? I don't do special, you know, highly unique and rare, appeals. What I do is general stuff that they taught us in law school. So general criminal law cases, general family law. Those are also the things where customers that are going to hire somebody who just started a firm, right? It's not a big, huge case. It's not like a big fancy law firm where they get the most elite, businesses in the world as their client. I'm going to get somebody who has, $300 to hire a lawyer, because they got a speeding ticket or something, so, but that adds up, as we mentioned earlier. I mean, I understood, because it was my dream, how important and special my customers and my clients are and were. And I was so grateful, and I still am. I did everything I could. I know, and I've had some confidence in my understanding of what we're doing legally. That part is what they do teach you in law school. What I didn't know, and I had to ask all these questions, and even when the people were mean to me, or even when they talked to me like I was an idiot, is the process. And again, every individual one of these courts has their own little specific rules. And they're different, and I'm not exaggerating. And because a general practitioner, and over the last, almost 2 decades, I've been in lots of different courts, because I've traveled and done lots of different things, and so they're different. Literally, it's, you got to ask, because they have their own rule and their own process, and there's no way you would know this unless you'd ever been there. So I ask, and I smile, and I always tell people, I'm really sorry, but and I don't ever interrupt, and I just wait till they have a minute, and then I ask, and I let them explain it to me. What their process is, where do you turn it in, how long does it take, how do you schedule stuff, what's the process for, it's so uniquely elaborate that even when you go to court and you have a hearing, let's say you're a lawyer, you're going to court because you're Your client had a ticket, a speeding ticket. This is the day, and this is the court you're supposed to go to. That's what the paperwork says. You show up. The process, even to be heard by the judge, is elaborate. Some courts will have a system where you show up and there are 50 other cases that show up at the same time. And I'm not exaggerating. And then they'll have a process where the judge will, sometimes it's the judge, sometimes it's somebody else who works there, but they'll literally start calling all 50 cases, just call them one at a time. Now, you don't even know how they're calling them. They could be calling them by the docket number, which is what it sounds like. It's a number assigned to the case on their little docket. They could be calling them by the name of the plaintiff. They could be calling them by the name of the defendant. You don't know. So you got to pay attention and ask questions. And sometimes there'll be 50 cases, they'll just start calling. And if whoever's there, you stand up, and then the judge or whoever works there will ask you how long you think your side of the case will take. Because what they're trying to do is see who's there and then understand what's going to take the longest. And they're trying to move through the short cases, now, and then hold up the thing that's going to take 2 hours, toward the end. You don't know any of this until you go or go down there before it's your court date and ask or call. Because you can't budget your time. And the thing about practicing law is it's a service, right? So you have to do it. And you don't know if you're going to go on something that's a traffic ticket and it's going to take 20 minutes, because that's really legally you don't have much of an argument. But you don't know if it's going to take 20 minutes because you got there, it was your slot, you talked to the judge, you were done in 20 minutes, or it'll take 6 hours because there's 50 other cases. This is how the judge does it. You don't know any of this, the rules of how they run their own little world. And so that's the part that on the show notes when I was saying ethnicity, it exists. I see the numbers. Age I saw was I see the data. Gender, I see the data. The thing that really was an obstacle is this, that there's nowhere where you have a practice of practicing law before you're licensed. Now, as I mentioned, if you were somebody who went in and had summer jobs, or you work for big fancy law firms, or just any other or nonprofit, that would have been a potential practice. But it's not required. And even if you did that, you're only going to learn what they do at that place, at that law firm or that nonprofit. You're not going to know anything about a court you haven't been to because you haven't been there. The other thing is, law school doesn't teach you anything about running a business. Now, they teach you business law, so you know all about corporations and the difference between that and an LLC. You know how to wind down a business. You in my jurisdiction, we had a lot of emphasis, and we were tested on the bar on federal income tax, so I know a lot about that. And I'm expertise to be a tax lawyer in some general senses, not a specialist, but in general senses. So I know a lot about the law of business, but the running of a law firm is totally different. Because it's all the basic stuff. Utilities, an office, negotiating a commercial lease, hiring people, right? Management of project, management of time, client management. Picking out your logo, picking out your letterhead, setting your fees. When you go on your own, none of this is set up. You have to decide all of this. How much are you going to charge? What are your terms of payment? And there's specific rules about practicing law about fees. So you need, all this has to be, you have to write your contract. Are you going to have something where, you're not going to get paid unless you win a case? You can only do that in certain types of cases, like personal injury, contingency cases. Are you going to have a situation where you take credit cards? If you do, even today they have new technology where you can use your smartphone and your tablet and, put a little accessory on there, and you can swipe the card and use it for credit cards. Back when I opened my law firm, none of this existed. I mean, a smartphone didn't exist. A tablet didn't exist. The internet as you know it today, it didn't exist for a regular, person who wasn't some sort of, specialist or scientist. None of this existed. So you had to get a merchant account. What's a merchant account? That's a whole other program, but it's basically you going to a lender and trying to explain and what you're going to be doing on your business. Now, you haven't even started it, so you don't have any, actual income to talk to them about, but you're talking about what you want to do. And you're trying to allow them to basically permit you to process credit cards. Now, again, because this is before the technology that existed today, then you would often have to get machinery where you can make an imprint of a credit card and physically. And all of this, the infrastructure of running a business, none of it's taught in law school. And so you'll see a quote on the show page where I am talking about the obstacles. The obstacles were that nobody teaches you this. And maybe they shouldn't. I mean, I went through in the beginning of the program and talked a bit about, very broadly, the history of what the law firm and law school is intended to do. You're going to go to an elite firm, or you're going to go maybe to maybe less elite firm, but it's still, very quality. You're going to be a law clerk. Or you're going to be a nonprofit. That's what they're doing. Maybe they're teaching you. Maybe you're going to be a law school professor. They're perfect for that. That's what it's set up to do. There was nothing then. There now. When I'm researching, looking at this, there are more schools. It looks like are trying to be more flexible. But then it wasn't. I don't think the plan that you're going to go out and open your own little firm. So them teaching you how to run a business, whether it was a law firm or a consulting firm or an accounting firm or anything, wasn't anything that they were interested in, because that's not what they're set up to do. They teach you the substance of the history of all this. They don't teach you the applied how to go do it tomorrow. Even stuff you'll think like, okay, criminal law. Let me finish. Let me read the quote really quickly. So the quote about, I was saying my obstacle. So here's a quote from an NBC News piece about lawyers going out starting their own law firms. It says, law schools are not equipped to help you start your own firm. And then it's from a person who went out and started their own firm after law school. And he said that he made last year when he was being interviewed, he made more than the $150,000 to $160,000 that a mid-level associate at a big law firm typically earns. So again, that's going back to this idea of what I mentioned earlier, that these big the big elite firms can pay these amounts. And this person saying, hey, I started my own law firm. I paid myself more than I would have made. I paid myself more than the 150 to 160, which obviously would be the goal, right? If not immediately, but eventually. There's another quote in the same article. The person said that they graduated from law school in 1994. Okay, so this is all right. This is more around my time. Passed the bar, and then put out their own business. And then she said that she received no practical business training at law school. Well, one, that's because that's around the time that I was in law school. No, that is the time, right? And I started before then, but I was still in law school in 1994. And yeah, I told you my story. I'm not alone, right? This person went to school in Connecticut, so it's not at all where I went to school in Texas. But the point simply is that that's not what law schools were intended to do. Now, it may be different now, right? And then there's a quote I want to make sure I get from this NBC piece. And it says, current or prospective law students need to understand that you can't just sit back and have classes spoon-fed to you and think it's going to be done. You're going to have to figure out things on your own. And if you're not prepared for that, don't go to law school. Okay. Now that probably you could apply that to the whole concept of the whole, because it's changed. The big law firms there are less of them. Certainly with the global economic crisis in 2008 and that time period, it dramatically impacted big corporations, banking and finance, a lot of, Wall Street. So a lot of, so there are reverberations everywhere. That's changed. But I also think it applies just to, you're going to be a solo. You're going to have to understand that you're going to have to go ask tons of questions, because none of this stuff is written down anywhere. And when I said that these local rules, many of those actually are written, but it's like a piece of paper in that court where whoever the judge is written down how you do it there. And they mean that. But and more of those are now getting on the internet. But even today, as I'm making this program, you have to understand, in really small courts, in small population areas, the funding isn't, these are government offices. The funding isn't there for some, great high speed, internet. And people don't have huge staffs to go around making, searchable PDFs and everything online. So you got to ask. And again, many of the people in government offices have long tenures. So you're asking somebody something, they've been working there, 30 years. And that's why the politeness, the respect, the deference, you need to never have an attitude. The fact that you're a lawyer is awesome. You should be very proud of that, but you don't ever need to go anywhere, I'm a lawyer. No. You don't know what you're doing in terms of how they run things in that office or how they do that process there. So you need to be totally deferential to that receptionist, to that clerk, to that office member, because they know everything and you know nothing. And if you are perceived as arrogant and you make your life difficult, they will always help you. It's their job. They work for the government. Of course, they're required to do their work, but they're not going to go out of their way to do anything above and beyond that. And you would be amazed at how important it is that you have good relationships with the people that work at these offices. They're not ever going to do anything to hurt your business, but they're not going to help you either. So I understood that because like I said, I had all these role models and from my grandmother, and so I knew how you treat people with respect and deference and friendliness. I talk to people all the time. One, because you're often there sitting, waiting on your chance to be in front of a judge. Why not be friendly? How are you doing today? Talk, listen. Get to know people. It's not going to hurt you, and it helps you. One, as a human, and two, yeah. Now, when they see you, yeah, Attorney Anderson, I saw one of your pieces of documentation come through. I just wanted to make sure that this is what you wanted. It helps you. That's just business 101. So I was saying that one of the obstacles is that there's not any formalized situation in law school to prepare you to actually run businesses of any type, whether it's a tech startup, whether it's your law firm, maybe it's consulting, maybe you want to be a writer. I don't care what it is. There just isn't anything typically in those types of things. The expert faculty are exactly what they sound like. They're faculty in the substance of that. Often they've studied the subject, but they've never actually practiced it. So they may know everything about entertainment law from the perspective of analyzing contracts, but in real life, they may have never in their entire life had anything to do with negotiating an employment contract, dealing with an employment a customer or client or anything like that, because that's not what their field is. Their field is studying it. Maybe they may be the leading scholar in the world on it and written about it and everything, but they've never actually done it. And those are two different jobs. So if you're going to go out and do something, then you're going to have to, if you didn't, you're not going to learn it in law school usually. So you're going to have to teach yourself. And the easiest way to do it is just ask. And you need to be humble and you need to be patient. You are never in a hurry. Look, you can't get done at a courthouse. And I keep mentioning this because that's most of what you're doing. Everything else you're doing at your office, right? You're typing something, you're talking to another lawyer. That there's flexibility. But the stuff you really have to get done, you're going to have to get done through a courthouse, and you have to work with other people. You're never in a, I used to see this all the time. I still do sometimes. Lawyers are so mean to people. They're mean to their own, admin and tech staff. They're mean to people at the courthouse, which is ridiculously self-destructive. I've even seen lawyers who I perceive to be being rude and mean to their own clients. I'll watch them at the courthouse. They're disrespectful, and they're always acting like they're in this hurry. I get it. We're all in a hurry, and time is money. And especially when you're a solo, you can only sell that minute once because you can only do one thing at a time, right? But if you are just dismissive and rude to people, I can't wait, I'm busy, then you know what? You're creating a very negative image for yourself. You need to have flexibility and you need to plan better. And you need to communicate. If you now with the advent of cell phones, I know I sound really old, but I'm not exaggerating. If you if you were around in the early 1990s, that the cell phone itself, forget a smartphone, I mean literally just like a mobile phone. I mean there's that. I remember my first experience where I ever touched and held a mobile phone, and it would look like something in a museum today, but I just thought like this is crazy. I mean, I was already in law school then, right? Like look at this, because nobody has this stuff. It doesn't exist like it does today. So today you have a mobile phone. My point is, if you're running late, and you should have a pre-plan where you let a customer know when they become a customer, and what the policy is of how you're going to communicate with them, that you have a good infrastructure. If it's just you, or if it's you and an admin person, or you and a paralegal, that you're going to reach out, and whatever it is that you do, I'm going to send you an email, I'm going to give you a voicemail, I'm going to have a text message to you. I'm running behind, and so that's what I'm saying. You communicate. Nobody's ever upset with you that you're doing your work. That's what they want, you to be an excellent lawyer. What they're upset with is you don't tell them what's going on. So when you answer the question, how did I start the law firm? Well, I went through in the first part of the show all the requirements to be a licensed lawyer. The second thing that I was talking about were some of the things people think are obstacles that in my personal opinion aren't. What do you want? If you want to run your own business, run it. I know lawyers I've met over the decades who are miserable, I think largely of their own choosing, and what they'll complain about is they don't make enough money. And the thing is, they could go start their own law firm right now and make more money. If you want to make more money, go make more money. Who stopped you? But then they'll give me those excuses. Oh, it costs money. I can't start a law firm. I literally had no money. As I said, I had been trying to run these other businesses, not trying to. I actually was running, but they weren't succeeding financially. My entertainment businesses and some of my mostly my entertainment and music businesses. So the office that the law firm was in, when it started, was the same place, and it was in a very low socioeconomic part of town. It was literally right next to the railroad tracks. Every time the train came by, and made noise. I had to put the phone on mute because the whole building would shake and the train was so loud with the train whistle you couldn't talk. It was a higher crime area, and the rent was like 125 US dollars a month. It's somewhere around there. I'm not exaggerating. Remember, I said I didn't have any money, so I had one suit. I didn't have any resources. I had the one suit, and I went and got some really nice costume jewelry, right? Because, people want somebody who looks the part. So, first hygiene, make sure you smell good and you take care of yourself and present yourself professionally. Then I had the one discount suit that I had. I was in my little office. That was $125 a month. I'm not exaggerating, US dollars. And then I went and had some nice costume jewelry that was like $3, but from far away, it looked nice. And that was it. We're in business. And then I understood where are customers that are going to hire somebody that, I'm not going to go out and get a big multinational corporation as my client as a solo at 26 and $125 an office by myself. It's ridiculous. Who will I get? People who need a general. You could maybe you specialize. Some people do. Some people's like, oh, I do family law only, or I do criminal law only, or you might be like I was, in sort of a general practice. That's kind of irrelevant. The point is, who pays for that? Well, it's somebody's got a smaller budget, like I said. So I did a couple of things that I always talk to lawyers about. In most parts of the country, there are referral services, and these used to all just be sort of quasi-governmental or quasi-related to the bar associations. And they're what they sound like. It's like a list of all the lawyers, right? And what their intent is to help people in the public get legal service. Now, big fancy companies and multinational organizations and multimillionaires have lawyers, big fancy lawyers. What if you're an average person? You never in your life, ever had a criminal case. You never in your life were ever divorced. Who do you go to? Who do you ask? Nobody knows a lawyer. So often that population does a couple of things. One, they have marketing. So most of the lawyer marketing you'll see on television in the States, in the US, and billboards, radio even, is directed to that general population. You don't see ads like, hi, I'm so-and-so law lawyer, and I have 37 years of experience. I represent the biggest corporations in the world, and here's my television commercial. Those people don't put television commercials out because they don't need to, because they already have referrals and networks of a reputation. The average commercial you see is for personal injury, slip and fall, car accidents, things like that, divorces, child custody, and then criminal law, because those are the things that sort of average people have happen to them, and those are people who don't have a lawyer, who've never known a lawyer, they don't know anybody who's a lawyer, and that's who is like, oh, okay, I don't even know where to start. So like I said, if you have money, then you advertise. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't afford to run a television commercial. I started out with the $125 a month office. I was already in that, because I was running the record company out of there. And then I opened law firm of Courtney Anderson, and I asked what you do in any business. Who are my clients? Your market analysis. And I did this before I started the firm, right? I didn't wait until the day I opened it and then sat around like, who are my customers? No, this was all set up. There are people who've never had a lawyer. I didn't have the money to run a television commercial or a radio ad or whatever. So I went to these lawyer referral networks, which are intentionally set up to help people, especially low income people or people who've never had a lawyer, find out who's a lawyer and what's a lawyer and all this. And so they ran, and they still do run systems where as a lawyer, they'll, you submit your documentation or whatever their process is and say, hey, I want to sign up so that when somebody comes to your, free service, it's not sort of free, they are free. And like I said, they usually were set up by bar associations or government entities to make sure that the public has access to finding a lawyer, right? It's a good thing. So you go and you register with them, whatever their process is. And the way it was set up, whenever I started my firm, they verify that you are who you say you are, that you're fully licensed and credentialed, and they do all this. And then when people would call or walk into their office and say, hey, I need a lawyer, and you're the government place that helps people find lawyers, can you help me? They would have a roster of lawyers that they would say, okay. And then they would do, no favoritism or anything. They'll just go in order. And they'll just sort of be like, okay, who's the next lawyer on the list who says they do divorces? And then they would give, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but maybe they would give 3 different contacts, and they just grab like the next 3 things on the list and say, here are the next 3 lawyers on our list who have signed up that we have confirmed and verified are currently licensed. You can, trust that they're currently licensed, and then contact them and see if they can help you with your case. And so that's what I did. I signed up on those things. It's free to sign up, or it was then. You to meet all their credentials, they check on you, and then you pay a fee. So if somebody does contact you, hey, I went through lawyer referral, and they gave me your number and I'm just calling to see if I can get an appointment. If the people come in and meet with you and eventually hire you, then you pay a percentage or a dollar amount of whatever it was back to lawyer referral to keep them, to help with their budget, right? So I did that. That was an easy thing. Um, the other thing I remembered, because I had run these other businesses and some successfully and some, disastrously, but I understood how important is marketing. So somebody being a brand ambassador. If somebody comes to me, and I don't care if they paid me $50 to represent them on their traffic ticket, I'm going to treat them like they are the most important customer in the world, because you know what? They are. And it's not that they are only representing the $50 that they were able to pay me. And if I had customers in the very beginning, look, if they had $50, but they didn't have it all at once, and we had to do a payment plan, that's fine. And I had all this created before I opened my business. I had all my little paperwork written up, and I'd put them on a payment plan. Can you bring in $10 a week? Yes, sure. Yes, I can. Okay. And you know what? It was beautiful, and I'm about to get emotional right now. It amazed me. Now here I am, and I'm very confident. I've gotten a wonderful education. I really know what I'm doing in terms of substance. But I don't know. I'm starting this business. Now looking back, I'm relatively young. The people that trusted me, even with their traffic ticket or their divorce, and the people who came and made that payment plan, just like they said that would. One of the things when I talk about the Joy Florida business, and when we do so much of this, and I say the power of this, it was such a validation of who I was as a person. I'm qualified and I'm licensed, and you know what? No, I'm not a big fancy law firm. They don't have a big fancy law firm problem. They have a $50 problem. And I treat them with respect. I did a lot of things with the infrastructure from the very beginning of the client contact list. So I always had an ongoing client contact list, and my assistant, who I'll be very honest, for a while was my brother and a friend or whoever, because I don't have any money. But we ran it very professionally, and we called every single week. Every single week we did an update. And if it was just a voicemail, hi, calling from the law office, Courtney Anderson, just wanted you to know the status on your case. Because the number one thing that lawyers get in trouble with in terms of their license is they just don't communicate. And forget the fact that's poor for your business. Who are you? Who are you to take the money for your customer and then not communicate with your customer? And it takes 90 seconds to make that quick check-in, and nothing's happened. We still have the court date that that was set. We told you about last week. Just want to reconfirm. Let us know if you have any questions or concerns. It adds nothing for you to do this, or for whoever's helping you to do this, but it makes that customer understand that they matter to you. And like I said, the validation it was for me that I could start literally with nothing, and people would trust me. And that they followed through on their part of the bargain. They came in with their payment plan. They showed up. They listened to everything I said. So when we went to court, we did. And it may seem like, well, who cared about that parking ticket, or who cared about their little criminal misdemeanor case? They cared. And I cared. And I gave it everything. And maybe I only had one suit. And then later when I was making more money, I had two, and my costume jewelry. But I took it so seriously. I took it so seriously. And I still do. Because it validates them and it validates me. They matter. Their problem matters. I'm going to do everything in my power to give them the absolute best representation and customer experience I can. In hindsight, what happened is I grew too fast. This is what a surprise, right? Me. Because I used lawyer referral. I understood that every single person I talked to was basically a marketing machine in it. That's what happened. And people would say to me, I've never talked to a lawyer who returned phone calls. Oh, I could do whole programs on this, right? Who listened to me. You treated me so respectfully. And then they'll refer 20 other people to you, because most people do know somebody. Oh my goodness, you were in a car accident? Like, oh, a lawyer, she was great. Oh, you having a child custody problem? Oh, somebody was arrested. And I would get whole families, right? Like I first helped one person, then their cousin, something happened to their dad, then they needed a will. And it grew so quick. The big mistakes I made, these are for a different program, where it grew so fast. One, I was so happy. Two, wow. So then we moved, to a big fancy office that was thousands of dollars a month in rent. But it matched, the what I wanted my customers to feel. And it was central, it was downtown. It was one of the most luxurious buildings. The more money I made, of course, I hired people. Sometimes it was hard to not, I mean hire like not, like a stranger, a friend, or relative, but like hire like a real, paralegal and assistant. And so then you're managing people, and sometimes those people fail to live up to what I expected. I got into problems where I had so much work, and I was that I took on too much sometimes, and there were time issues, or I made infrastructure mistakes, because there's only so much you can do in one day, right? Not anything where I hurt my my clients, but just the growth pains, because it did grow really quickly. And I believe one of the reasons it grew really quickly is because of how I treated my customer. I'm honored every time that someone would 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 trust me. And then the other thing is that I saw many of the other lawyers just, and I didn't just see it, but this is what my clients told me. They just treat people so badly. Like they treat their client and their customer like they're a hassle, like they're a bother. I don't care what business you're in, but I talked about this. I talk about this in our Educators Eden series, right? Educators who, my students, I'm just so tired of them. Really? Are you serious? Because if you don't have a student, you're not an educator. You don't have any income in this. So why? That's the most important part. People say to me, "Oh, my clients drive me crazy. I hate these customers," and I honestly just feel physically ill sometimes. Really? Because without a client or a customer, you have no business. You have nothing. You have negative zero. Not only do you have zero income, but you also have nothing because you have nobody to refer anybody to you or anything like that. I'm really hurt by this. One of the most powerful and wonderful things in relationships, I believe, in life, which is why I'm the workplace relationship expert, is the workplace relationship we have with our customer, with our client. I mean, I just don't even understand that. And if a student is your client or customer, if someone in the public, that's why you're here. If you don't want to do this and you don't respect them, then you need to do something else. And I mean this. So part of how it grew too fast and how it was financially successful. What do I mean financially successful? I mean, I made money. I made money to pay all the bills and to hire other people and to pay myself more of a salary than like the quote I read you here. I paid myself more of a salary than anybody else would have paid me. I mean, I'm sure there would have been maybe some super fancy thing that I could have gone to that would have maybe matched that originally, but partially, like I said earlier, I didn't even pay attention to that when I was in school. But the other part is this was my dream, and it came true, and it surpassed everything I ever hoped, and it opened up so many other potential new doors. But I'll never lose the pride and the excitement of that. And you'll see that with business people all the time. You go somewhere and they have the first dollar, framed on the wall, and what it means is it represents is real. And I'm so touched and honored by every person who has ever been part of the law firm. But in addition to the lawyer referral service, because people say, well, how else did you do it? I'm telling you, I signed up for all those free things that will funnel lawyer people your way. Now, is every one of those calls going to be a great lawyer who has somebody who has money that you can help? No, a lot of them are going to be people who don't even have a legal problem. But the thing is, if you talk to somebody, do what I believe in as a lawyer, free consultations, which is where someone comes to your law office and they schedule a consultation to talk to you. They may not even have a legal problem, but if you listen, if you give them attention, you treat them with respect, here's the thing. They'll leave, and even though they didn't hire you because either they didn't have a legal problem or they have no money. They can't even do a payment plan. Like there's just nothing. But they may have been so touched with how well you respected them and how well you treated them that they'll refer somebody else to you, and that happened all the time. The other thing is everywhere you're out, you're in existence, remember, is an opportunity. So I'd be at the courthouse dealing with someone else's, parking ticket. But people would see other people, and this happens to me all the time. I was at the courthouse recently, I mean, literally like a few days ago doing my volunteer lawyer work. So I'm a lawyer, I'm doing court cases, and there's a volunteer case. And people came up to me, just people who were waiting, and they said, "Oh, so you're a lawyer?" And I'll say, "Yeah." Often because I'm in a suit, and I have my briefcase. Now I have many suits. This has been, so I'm not just wearing that same one old suit, right? And people come up to me and say, "Well, can I get your card?" That just happened a few days ago, and I now have to say to people, well, usually I have to say, well, I'm happy to give you a card, but I'm not taking any clients right now because I'm not taking law clients and most of the things people want to ask me about because we have the show, and we have so many other things I'm doing. I have very select legal cases I take. And the reason they say that is because of how I present myself. I hate to say this, but I've been, I've been all over the country, and I've seen people who are lawyers, licensed and everything, but they don't present as a lawyer. They look, their hygiene, or they're not put together professionally. Like I said, you could do this with no money. I literally took costume jewelry and in a discount suit in a place for $120, $25 a month next to the railroad track. But I treated myself within all of that as the most professional hygiene, grooming. Look the part as much as you can. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is how I talk to people, how I listen to. So I sit and listen to my client and customer, and how I talk to the staff and people. To Al, like, can I have your card? And then sometimes I'll get it as a huge compliment because they will have watched me putting forward a legal issue in front of a judge, and they'll say, "Wow, you're a really good lawyer. You speak so well, and you're really great." And okay, all of that. So it's constant, 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 which is part of what led to me growing so quickly that I was overwhelmed, right? It's so much stuff. And I'd say yes to everybody. One of the worst mistakes I ever made when I opened the law firm in the first year or so, I was growing so quickly. And another lawyer who'd been practicing for decades, very successful, sort of, reached out to me, and I think they thought they were helping me, right? Thinking, well, here's this young person who knows nothing, who's nobody, in terms nobody knows her, that's been practicing, and offered me some sort of overflow work that they had. The problem here was that I couldn't handle their overflow work because I had my own overflow work I couldn't handle. But I was too immature to have said to them immediately, "This is such a wonderful gesture and it's so kind, but I'm overwhelmed right now. I have more work than I can handle." I didn't do that, and the person was so gracious with their time. And I really believe had the best intentions, thinking they would help me with this sort of overflow work they had. The problem, of course, was I couldn't handle my own overflow. I took their work. I actually contracted. This is a horrible, horrible, one of the worst decisions. I subcontracted to another lawyer the overflow work that this lawyer wanted, and then the other lawyer gave me back work, and it wasn't at all what it should have been. So, but I didn't have the ability at that point. The time was up, so I submitted it. And of course, so I'm angry at the lawyer I subcontracted it to, which I should have been. But the point is this: I shouldn't have taken the work. Right? So I'm angry at the lawyer I subcontracted to. I went back to the lawyer who'd given it to me. I gave them the deliverables and explained to them, I subcontracted it, and and they were very unhappy. And then what I said was, I'll pay you back. I'm going to have to give you the fees back because they'd already paid me a fee for accepting it. So at that point I was stressed, and I had a lot of things, like I said, the infrastructure. So I'm making money constantly, right? But there's infrastructure, and because I'm small, who makes the deposits at the bank? I am. I had an issue because I'd known through some of my family stories, and this is a really big problem for small businesses, is theft, right? So I knew that if I took the deposits to the bank myself, then the odds of somebody stealing from me are lower. That's true. The other problem, though, is that means that only I'm doing it, and I'm running around, in court. I'm meeting with clients. I'm very busy. So now I get to the bank to make the deposit, and it was later than I intended, or it was earlier than whatever. So I'm stressed. Now I'm making money, which is great, and it was wonderful. It was cash flow positive. It had to be because I didn't have any other reserves financially, but it was all of this, balancing and fast growth and too many clients. It sounds like a dream come true, but honestly, it can be a nightmare. And it was a lot I had to learn to temper that. And one of the first things was you got to say no to stuff, which is why now when people ask me, "Can I get your card?" I'm like, I'm happy to give you a card, but I just want to be really clear. I cannot accept this, because my problem in the beginning was, I just felt like, well, obviously I didn't have any money, and B, I wanted to do everything. And so I said yes to stuff, and I got to a point, I'm talking within months, where it was just way too much. So this horrible, embarrassing lesson, which I needed to learn, and I'm not at all ashamed to share because it was powerful. I took the overflow work from the other very experienced, well-known lawyer. Shouldn't have done that, because I knew sitting there when we were discussing it in their office that there's no way I could do it. I was already overwhelmed. Subcontracted it out, and which is what often happens. It was nowhere near the quality of what I would have done. I'm angry with the person I subcontracted it to, but here's the deal: I already had to pay them for that. So when I said to the lawyer who was so kind to offer me the opportunity, of course I'll have to pay them back the money, which I did. But I went on a payment plan to do that, because now I'd already spent the money that they had given, almost all of it, on the subcontracted service. And that person refused to pay the money back, and I just let it go, because what was the point? And and then I worked my way back and paid back the fees. And was that embarrassing that I took on overflow work? Yeah. The lessons I learned from all of that are, A, you got to learn to say no. And when you're starting a new business, it's hard to say no, because you're so excited and you're so touched and you're so moved and all of that. But here's the deal: you have to take on more overhead to be able to handle more business, which is going to cost you more money. I got to hire more people. And then, and that's a whole nother program. The stories I'll tell of interviewing and trying to hire people. You think, like, how hard is this? But it's really hard, because not everybody's self-disciplined or self-motivated, and I don't care if they're a lawyer or, an admin person that, you're paying a couple bucks, near minimum wage to. You still have this whole regular management situation of finding the best qualified and keeping the best qualified. So there's a lot that went really well in starting the firm. It exceeded my expectations in terms of the money I made, in terms of the wonderful cases I got to work on, the people that I met, the confidence I learned. All of that was great. There's a lot of really important lessons I learned, which are it grew too fast. And I got caught in the same box that everybody does when it grows too fast. You either have to, again, hire more people, and then the more you hire them, of course, you have less quality control. Or you got to learn, which I did after some of these painful embarrassments, you got to say no. And even though other people may look at you and think, why are you, how dare, you're saying no, but the truth is, yeah, because I already have too much on my plate. That's a good problem to have, but it's something that if you haven't experienced it, and it's not something that people talk about a lot about, either lawyers or any other businesses. They talk a lot about how to get customers. Everybody talks about how to get a customer and how to retain a customer, and we do too. But there's not a lot on the other side of that. What if that works too well? I have too many customers. And it's one of the most painful experiences when you're unable to exceed the expectations of a customer. You took on too much. And that was one of the things. So one of the things I really try to maintain now, you'll know if you've reached out and contacted my office and work with me in any capacity, is I know most of the time, we're not to either plan it quite a way out, or I'll tell you I can only, maybe do a little bit to help you, or I'm not accepting any new, coaching clients or mentoring clients, or I'm booked up for my speaking engagements for the next year or whatever. And that's not to be difficult. It's because I've learned the hard way what happens when I stretch myself too thin, and I'm running around wanting to be the best I can for everybody, and it's just too much. And then you get into the issues of when you expand, and you've got to have the quality people, because if you don't, you're in deep trouble. So the challenges of growing too fast and being more successful than you anticipated are very real. So this program was all to try to give you a very, I was going to say the plan was a very brief, but actually it has been, because there's a lot I touched on in here that I know are all additional individual programs. Well, how did you get the merchant account? How did you negotiate a commercial lease? How did you know when it was time to move to a bigger office? What kind of retention touches did you do? I didn't even get to my mail outs. In addition to using the lawyer referral service and understanding that everybody is a brand ambassador, I also went out and figured, look, if people want to start a business, many of them are going to file for sole proprietorships because those are nominal. I mean, I don't know. Depending on where you are in the U.S., you can go to your courthouse online or in person and file paperwork that's, a few dollars. Maybe it's $30. It's really low. To file a corporation, it's going to cost you a couple $100s. So many people file for sole proprietorships because it's new and they don't want to spend a lot of money. I figured correctly that not that many lawyers were going to go market to them, because many lawyers would think, hey, they spent $30 on a business, they probably aren't that serious. That's actually not an inaccurate assessment. The challenge, though, is that since nobody else is marketing to them, I went and got the list. It was free. I went to the county and I got the list of who filed for DBAs, doing business as sole proprietorships, and then I did mailers. I got you got to have to get approval from your lawyer advertising committee for whatever bar association, but I did all that, and then I sent out a letter. Congratulations, our records show that you've filed for your new business. I put the name of it. I want to introduce myself and my law firm and blah blah blah. And because nobody else was sending lawyers to those people, then I got a lot of attention, and I got a ton of business off of those. Again, the people individually, or the person would meet with me or talk and have a consultation and say, you know what, I don't have any need right now, but my cousin is getting divorced. Do you handle that? Oh, I sure do. Referrals. I have other stuff I could share, but there are a lot of the strategy that I talk about in everything we do in these shows and all the different series and programs is exactly what I did to get to the point, of course, where I had too much business and then had to learn some painful lessons about you got to turn stuff down. But you have to plan and you have to think, where are our customers and where is there a lack of competition and where is there somewhere that you're going to be able to get an advantage. And then you got to be strategic. And again, how you treat people is crucial. So yes, no matter what your age is, if you're 20 or you're 87, then I'm always going to say we're going to execute, right? We're going to move forward. Gender is whatever your gender identity it is. So I don't know what we can talk about other than the data will help you understand maybe how other people may treat you based on the data, but I don't think it needs to do anything in terms of what your plan is. I mean, your plan is your plan. You are you. So you're moving forward irrespective of what anybody else is going to do or say. Same thing, national origin, religion, or ethnicity, or color, any of that. I mean, you're aware of it. And it's part of who you are, and it's awesome because you're awesome. But it has anything to do with the actual business and the strategy and the things that you're going to do in your life, right? So I did want to mention that you need to be cautious of being too successful too quickly, because that's a very painful lesson. But you can absolutely do whatever it is in terms of your business and entrepreneurial goals. And I hope that some of the things I've shared, and I know it was a lot, but I was trying to explain a little bit about what it takes to be a lawyer, then just a little bit of data about people who do open law firms, a little bit of an overview of some of the methods that I use for marketing from zero with no money. The other thing I do want to mention before we leave for marketing, I remember I said I was in a little place by the railroad tracks. It was $125 a month, and it was a sort of a low socioeconomic income area of town. What I did also is I just walked around and introduced myself to people in that area. So people in that little business, there was like a car dealer across the street. I just introduced myself, and here I am, and I'm a lawyer. I've opened my law firm, and that also tons of referrals and customers. So you are able to do more than you or anyone else thinks you can. I do caution you, of course, and we have other programs. We have a whole series about surpassing your goals, the satisfaction saturation series, and I'll do more specific follow-ups on some of these things, what happens when you grow too quickly, and understanding how to spot that as early as possible to try to stem the problem of too much business and or expansion too quickly, which impacts quality control. But I'm very honored that you were part of our program. I hope that I explained a little bit about what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and I have to, again, and just in hindsight, even though I said earlier that I wish I paid a little bit more attention, and I do in law school to kind of what was going on. I don't think there would have been anything as exhilarating, as enjoyable, as emotionally rewarding, and honestly as economically rewarding as getting out there and seeing what I'm capable of as a business person and as an attorney. So I don't think it would have changed the outcome, because I think this is what I think this is where I flourish and thrive. I do think I could have been a little bit more mature, as I've talked about in other programs, of paying more attention and taking advantage of things that were right there in front of me. But I was so, I'm always so focused on speed, right? I got so much to do. It's funny. That was so much my focus, and at this point in my life, I'm just now realizing that we need to slow down a little bit. So, thank you. Stay in touch. Reach out to me. Come to CourtneyAnderson.com, of course. Leave show ratings and reviews on iTunes or Stitcher or Spreaker or Libsyn or anywhere else you find our program. And reach out. Let me know how your show and how your show, many people actually do start shows, how your show and how your businesses are going. And if you are interested in anything else, let me know. Send me an email. And like I said, from time to time, we do get openings for mentoring and coaching programs. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. But there's a lot to take in, I think. But we did go over sort of the basics of what I wanted to cover in this very important program. And thank you. Thank you so much for being part of the show and the program today.